So yeah, so the subject.
I'm gonna leap right
Horror.
in. Yeah, God, that's weird for an episode of Strange Playgrounds. That's
Well,
really weird.
actually, just
People
to
are,
get straight into the point, actually discuss the
yeah,
subject at
God,
hand.
that's
Yeah.
weird. People are gonna get whiplash, or they're gonna feel like they're being shortchanged. Jesus
Well,
Christ.
it's just that I remember what happened the last time we tried doing the alien one, which we
Ah,
will go back to.
yeah,
Which we will
yeah,
go back to. We are going to do that.
yeah. That's true. That's true. That came out well, didn't it? Well, it
Yeah.
did come out well. It's just like we just didn't talk about
Not the
Alien very
subject.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all.
But no. But this subject in particular really sort of resonated with me because it's something that I've seen come up time and time again, and it's something I get more and more annoyed with the more I think about it.
It's one of them, yeah.
Yeah. And the subject is why does horror, and particularly horror fiction, is the greatest like sort of one to suffer from this.
Hmm.
Um, it sort of outstays its welcome. It's particularly in horror cinema. Um, so I'll give you an example. When they make a franchise out of something that really, if you think about it, there wasn't enough material there to warrant a
Yes.
franchise.
Right. I mean that is actually something, but it's only true of particular eras and types of horror. That's the interesting thing. Like
Mm.
you go back to what people consider to be the golden age of cinematic horror, which is it's arguable where it starts, but most people would say it's sort of like it's around the 1960s. Most people would say it starts with Night of the Living Dead, around that era, and then
Mm.
it carries through the 70s right through the 80s really
Yeah.
up until may arguably the early 90s. What
Well,
you
I'd
get
say
is
it's still prevalent. It's still prevalent now.
oh
Um,
yeah, no, I mean like that's like the golden age of like horror cinema. So
yeah,
that period is it's when you're getting really wonderful, clever, socially and politically reflexive horror coming out of in mainstream markets as well. In mainstream markets, so you're getting this wonderful form of horror cinema that is trying to say something that
yeah,
actually really wants to reflect culture back at you. It's where all the sort of what people now consider to be
yeah,
the iconic
like the
cinematic
Romero
horror
shit
comes
and things
from.
like that.
Exactly.
And
Basically, it's the stuff that's like post-Vietnam, it's post-civil rights movement. It's
yeah,
reflecting all of these like cultural and political turbulences,
yeah,
mostly in the USA. Let's face it, mostly in the
yeah,
USA, but also sort of on a global scale. But you get towards like say the late 80s and you start getting that slowing down and what you get is as with so many things the commodification of horror.
yeah. Banality more than anything else.
Exactly. So basically, studios start you get this the notion of formula cropping
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
So
but it's not even done cleverly. It's
no,
I'll give you an example. Films that I personally think should, if they were going to warrant a sequel, maybe push it to one, maybe two sequels tops, and that's your absolute limit. Friday the 13th,
Friday,
right?
yeah,
Friday the
yeah.
13th, the original film is not a very good film.
It's not. No, I know
I
it's a
know
kind of sacrilege, but
it's
it's kind of not. No, I mean, and it's the kind of horror that I personally have absolutely no interest in whatsoever. I find it boring as all fuck, I've got to say. The very sort of conservative stalker of teenagers having
yeah,
sex, I don't really have much cotter with that unless there's something else to it, unless they're doing something with the format. So like things like I think the original Halloween is a very interesting piece of work in that regard,
yeah,
because it has more going on than
yeah.
just that. It has a lot more going on. But Halloween is actually probably one of the arch examples of this. Now, the original Halloween, I actually really like. There are certain elements of it that I find problematic, definitely. I find the politics of it, for example, problematic. I find the notion that like the only characters who are essentially killed are like teenagers who have sex or take drugs or whatever. There's a kind of moral and
Yeah,
conservatism to it in that regard. But it also has a lot of other stuff going on as well. So that wonderful ambiguity, for example, where Sam Loomis brings this really strange kind of like supernatural element to it. So when people talk to him, he talks about Michael Myers as though he's the devil, as though he's inhuman. And at
yeah,
the end of the film, that's kind of borne out. He's been stabbed, he's been shot, he's fallen off a balcony, and he still disappears. He just disappears. Doesn't even get up and walk away. He's just gone. And you get that wonderful line from Laurie Strode, it was the boogeyman, wasn't it? And it's kind of, yeah, that's the ambiguity. And it leaves it. It doesn't explain it. It doesn't tell you anything. It just leaves that wonderful cold ambiguity. Now, the existence of a sequel that features Michael Myers murders that stone dead.
Yeah, but the original Halloween sequel, Halloween 2, was clever in the sense that it takes place within the same night as the first one. So
Yeah.
there is a tangible link there to the first one, and therefore you could argue, yeah, okay, so he's not finished doing his shit.
I suppose Halloween 2 you could get away with because it is just a continuation of the same story. You can basically just watch the first one and the second one back to back, and it's more or less the same.
Yeah.
It's continuing the same story. Even so, I don't. When I go back and watch Halloween, it's just the first Halloween
Just
because
Halloween,
I like the ambiguity of the ending. I like the notion that maybe he wasn't just like a disturbed child. He was actually
maybe he was something else. But the problem
something
is when you
else.
start getting to chapters 7, 8, 9,
Oh
10,
God.
you then take basically all the horror out of it. There is nothing now to be scared about.
Right, and even
I,
like what tends to happen then is also they just miss the point of what makes the original film so interesting. So, in the original film, you have this wonderful framing. Almost everything is in darkness.
yeah,
There's this wonderful sort of chiaroscuro thing happening with light and shadow, and he seems to like almost emerge from the shadows. It's almost like he teleports through them, you know? It's really cool. The framing of Michael Myers himself is really clever because you hardly ever see him in light. You see
yeah.
darkness. The latter films throw that out. They throw that out completely. You see him in full light. You see the mask. You see the details, and it kills it. It kills it stone dead. And the thing
Yeah.
about characters like Michael Myers, there's not much intrigue to them, I find anyway, because the most they can do is kill you.
Well,
That's
yeah,
it. You know,
but
I find that dull. I find that kind of boring, if I'm honest.
I always found it funny that they chose a William Shatner mask for Michael Myers,
Yeah.
because for me, all Michael Myers is a manifestation of William Shatner's dramatic pauses,
Yeah, he's just the
getting
absence in
more and more
between. Yeah.
fucking ludicrous as each one goes on, to the point where
Yeah.
you're going, are you going to do anything at this point?
But
I mean,
yeah, I mean, it is the original's a great film. It's a really atmospheric. It's really well made. Shoestring budget, obviously.
yeah.
It's John Carpenter's first big film. Wasn't made as a big film. It's like no budget at all. Um,
Well, that's why the location is singular.
yeah.
It pretty much all takes place in that house, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
It's not
That's right.
his fucking aunt's house that he rented out for the weekend just to get this
Yeah,
fucking film shot.
because there's no budget at all, you know.
No,
It was literally held together by like sticky tape and blue tack and
but
whatnot.
budget is something I'm definitely going to come onto later, because budget affects horror cinema in
I
the
think
most
probably,
fundamental ways as well. And I've got a fantastic example to
yeah,
back that up with.
probably
Um,
more than any other genre, I would argue. There's
yeah,
something about money. There's something about budget in horror. It's not universally true, just like it's not universally true for sequels or remakes or whatnot. But there is a tendency for money and big studio interference to ruin horror.
yeah, but it doesn't pay off.
Ah,
It doesn't pay off. Saw was made for what, fucking $300,000 or something like that, and every single penny of that is on screen. And Saw still has a fantastic ending. And I go, do you know what? That is creepy as fuck and well played to you. If you're going to play out Saw's story, then yes, it ends at Saw 3, where they cut Jigsaw's throat on an operating table. Right. The next 16 films in the franchise
no, no.
have little to no effect on the overall story, but more and more money is thrown at it. Just because your first film got a return of what, fucking 120% or whatever it was, doesn't mean that it's a cash cow.
Well,
So
I mean,
Saw,
what you're dealing with there is people who actually fundamentally misunderstand why a created thing works. They
yeah,
actually they misunderstand like the phenomena of it. The notion, for example, you can't create it. It doesn't work. You can't manufacture that phenomena. It either
no,
catches or it doesn't. And so much of that is reliant on factors that no studio can control. So like a big factor, for example, is cultural climate. So it's why most pieces of art either work or don't. They come out at a time in an environment where they reflect something fundamental. It may not be overtly so. Like, take the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for an example. The
Yeah,
original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a post-Vietnam film,
yeah,
right? In every conceivable respect, it's reflecting all of the concerns that are going on in the USA at that point. It's beautifully resonant in that regard. Now, the people who made it probably didn't realize they were even doing that. If you watch the interviews with Tobe Hooper, he says, we had no idea that, for example, we were actually talking about like the generations that were traumatized after Vietnam. We didn't realize we were talking about like racial politics and the atomization of the family and all that kind of thing. But it's all in there.
yeah,
It's all in there. And the reason it works is because it hits those notes consciously or otherwise. You
yeah. And
can't
then,
manufacture that.
yeah, and then what happened after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Endless
Then you get the Texas
sequels.
Chainsaw Massacre 2,
Yeah, the
and then
remakes and the it just and
Son of the Scrotum in the. I don't know what
just
it becomes. Horror is the worst genre for this
mhm,
because it can run out of steam. That like, a franchise, I hate using that fucking word, but
yeah,
a franchise will run out of steam very, very quickly. And
yes.
when they do, they either tend to fall into two brackets. One, a Rob Zombie remake,
Oh
right?
God, I wish he'd just stay away. I'll be
Yeah,
honest, I wish he'd just stay away. I don't. It's one of those situations of a kind of nepotism where people seem to think that because somebody has success in one area that they're good in another, that they can
yeah,
do things creatively in
which
another,
is
and they
fundamentally not true.
can't. They
Fundamentally
well,
not true.
clearly,
Right? But they
clearly,
either fall into Rob Zombie remake territory, or they fall into self wink wink nudge nudge say no more parody,
yeah,
such as the Child's Play
yeah,
fucking series.
right,
Now,
right,
the Child's Play series was probably the only ones that were a little bit clever with it,
hmm
mostly because of the direction they took it in and the casting as well. Jennifer Tilly with
yeah.
Brad Dourif is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean the funny ones are actually funny, aren't they? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's you've got to sort of after basically Child's Play 3, you've got
yeah.
to reorient your expectations of the films.
Well, yeah,
Because if you come in expecting like a horror film, you're not going to get it. They become something else, you know. They become like you said, like a parody of themselves. But
yeah,
that does work. I mean, they're fun films. They're reasonably well made. They're fun. They're schlocky.
yeah.
Um,
That's what the Nightmare on Elm Street series ended up becoming.
yes,
And
unfortunately.
like Nightmare on Elm Street, again, one film. That's
hmm
all you need.
Yeah.
One film with an ambiguous ending. It fucking does its job perfectly. The only film past the first one that had any merit at all or any weight to it was Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Which is
Right?
actually not a bad film at all.
No, if you go back and watch it, Freddy Krueger, who has got to be possibly the most meta horror character ever, right?
hmm
And you take a whole spin on it where he's invading the real world and the people who were in the films and the person who played them. That's about as meta as you get. And they
hmm
did nothing with it after that.
No, no. I mean,
And
it works. I mean, that is actually very often when you get that trope turning up in fiction, where you've got like a long running series and it becomes meta, where the characters meet their creators and they realize that they're created and all that bollocks.
yeah,
That's usually the kiss of death. It's
yeah.
often the
Not in the case of
case,
that film.
but not in that film. No, it's really weird. It actually, and I think part of the reason that works is because of the nature of Freddy Krueger himself. You know, the fact that he is like an imaginary nightmare stalker.
Hmm.
You can see how that metaphysics works, you know, and they actually explain it in the film as well, you know. So it does actually work with regards to the original mythology as well. And it's just done very well. It's just done very, very well. They remove most of the tongue-in-cheek stuff,
Yeah,
and they make it like a proper horror film.
yeah. There's not that much special effects to fall back on. There's not because it's supposed to be a real world set.
hmm
There's none of that sort of hanging on decorative bullshit.
hmm
It's more of any of the films in that fucking hell franchise. It's probably the biggest one close to a character study you're going to get.
Yeah, and
And
interestingly enough, it kind of acts as like a prototype for Scream. It's got that same
yes,
sort of meta commentary going on that the Scream
yes,
films do.
yeah,
Um,
but Scream is a lot more tongue in cheek
oh,
and
totally,
play
yeah.
with it.
Scream is an
Um,
interesting one because it is the ultimate end point of what we're talking about here. Because
hmm,
Scream represents horror realizing its own formulas, even by one of the key figures, Wes Craven, who originally established those formulas. It's basically
Yeah,
horror looking at itself and realizing where it is. And in that regard, I love the first three Scream films. I think they're actually really clever, sharp parodies of the notion of horror franchises. So the first film is a parody of an original slasher film in the
yeah.
slasher genre. The sequel is a
It's a
parody
parody of the
of
sequel, yeah.
sequels, and the third film is a parody of third films in horror franchises, and it works really well. It does start to run out of steam, I mean,
Yeah. By
the
the fourth film,
joke,
it's starting to take itself
yeah,
a little too seriously, and
yeah,
in that case, you've really missed the fucking point
the joke
of that
wears thin,
of that
doesn't it?
particular IP. I mean,
But they're really charming films. I mean, I went back and watched them recently. They're very 90s, they're very of their era, but that actually works really well for them because that's what they're parodying.
yeah,
That's the point of them. They're very sharp. They're very aware of the parodies of the genres that they're parodying, obviously, and they work really, really well. The scary moments are scary, the violent moments are violent, and the funny moments are hilarious. So
yeah.
yeah, it's good.
One franchise that I was sorry to see go downhill, and somehow it managed to redeem itself in the last 2 minutes of the last film, was Final Destination,
Oh,
because
the Final Destination films, yeah.
Final Destination, they actually offered something quite new, apart from chucking a bit of work every once in a while via Tony Todd's
Well,
way.
by their
They,
very nature, the Final Destination films are the manifestation of what we're talking about
oh,
because they remove the middleman. They
yeah,
are again they're like Scream. They're all parodies of this genre. The subgenre of horror where it is essentially just an excuse for elaborate set pieces where
yeah.
you're just waiting for the incredibly
Most
circumstantial
and
violence
most
to happen.
ridiculous, overblown fucking teen
Yeah.
death they can think up for that. And I thought that idea in itself was great.
It's good
That
fun,
works.
It is good fun. It does, again, like all of them, it runs out of steam. I
Yeah,
think, again, it only warrants one film.
yeah. But where it sort of redeemed itself was, I think, in like weirdly enough, in its fifth film, where they tied it all back to the first one, and
Mhm.
it's a prequel to the first one. It's like, actually, that no one saw that coming. And
Yeah,
hats off to you.
yeah,
That was well played. That's a clever point in the script.
yeah.
But instances like that are so few and far between.
But what I find the part of the problem is sincerity. So, this is particularly true of what we were talking about earlier. When you've got movies that are produced by big studios, that are optioned by big studios, that are often remakes of original films or sequels to original stories, they are not created with any sincerity. They're not made to tell a story.
Or any interest. No,
Or any
that's
interest, exactly. They are made A, to keep a hold on the franchise, and B, just to make a quick buck. I mean, the
yeah.
Hellraiser films are probably one of the
I'm,
arch
I'm
examples. They're the arch examples of this.
at a
Um,
pinch. At a pinch, I would say for me the Hellraiser series stops again at number 3, but that's
yeah,
pushing it.
it's
That's
pushing
really
it.
pushing it.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like 3 fine for what it is. It's a fun film. I can sit and
Yeah.
watch it. It's got some great moments in it.
Mhm.
It's got some great lines in it, but boy, is it a schlocky piece of dreck? Yeah,
Oh,
it
it's
is.
contrived as fuck.
Yeah, it is. It's shot in this very 1990s way. That it's written in a very 1990s way. It feels a bit like a telemovie, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
At times. Again, it does that thing that we talked about earlier. When makeup is and costumes are not designed to be seen in full light,
Yeah.
and it
And Pinhead as well.
shines like
Yeah.
blinding like sunlight on them. There's that sequence at the end when there's that when they go into Joey Summerskill's mind and they're in like the field and the sun shining down, and Pinhead is there, and that costume looks bad in sunlight. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it does
It
not
really does.
work. It's not designed to be in sunlight. You're not supposed to see him like that.
I mean, I there are certain films that I think if they thought they could have got away with it, they would have made more. I cannot imagine like them doing a sequel to Session 9. But if they thought they could have got away with it, if Session 9, if anyone had actually bothered watching it, or if it actually made any money, I dare say they would have fucking done that.
Well, I mean, they would, because look at the Blair Witch Project. If there was ever
Yeah,
a film that never warranted a sequel because it doesn't need one, it
yeah, but
is.
it made too much money. Again,
It's
that's the
again,
problem. It came out at a time when
yeah.
everybody went, "Oh fuck, that's something new," and
Mm-hmm.
that is one a horror film's greatest achievement, but it's
Yeah.
also its biggest detriment as well.
Yeah, yeah, and of course the people who make the sequels and who make. Did you see the 2016 remake of the Blair Witch Project?
No, I didn't. No.
Again, totally miss the point of what makes the original work. I mean, part of what makes the original Blair Witch Project, again, it's context. So the original Blair Witch Project came out. People tend to forget this in the earliest days of home internet. The earliest days. So the viral marketing campaign for the Blair Witch Project, which if you remember was they marketed it as though it was real.
That's right.
As
Yeah,
though it was
the
real
actors weren't allowed to
footage.
take any paid gigs for like a year
Yeah,
or something.
that's right.
And
That's right.
Everyone thought they were dead.
Yeah, I mean, there were people still like for years after who still thought that some of that footage was real. They still thought some of that footage was real because they used the internet. They set up like these phony investigation sites, all sorts of stuff. They set up phony. The town isn't real, you know. Burkittsville doesn't exist, you know.
Yeah, I mean, but you are talking about some exceptionally stupid people out there, probably more so in the American. The same sort of people that would phone in and tell fucking Nigel Farage on LBC radio that he's doing a fucking good job and they're proud of him. Those sorts of stupid people.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind so much if a horror film came out and it had all the staples of like a franchise. Everyone said this is going to be the next big thing, and at the end it turned around and went fuck yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I myself ever get to the position where I make it, you know, where I'm involved in a horror film, I would want something like that written into a contract. You know, no sequels, no remakes, at least
nothing.
for like a decade or more, you know?
Yeah, we're going back when we're talking about budgets. The greatest example of M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit.
Oh yeah, which is actually it's not a bad film. I can't believe I'm saying that. I can't believe that
it was a Shyamalan film until it came up at the end of being Jen Taylor and sat there and went, well, fuck.
Right. So he
this
can
is what happens
do
when
it.
when he's told you're not allowed any money. Go fuck off.
He can do it. That's what baffles me. He can direct a halfway decent film.
Yeah.
It's just you know what happens.
A bit of cash in his pocket.
Yeah.
He goes fucking mental.
You know what happens with him? It's ego. M. Night Shyamalan has one of the biggest egos in Hollywood, and he trips over it all the bloody time.
Okay, I'm not being funny about this, right? But if your only decent outings, right, before Split, right, which nobody knew was a sequel, if the only decent outings you had was The Sixth Sense to a degree and Unbreakable, I wouldn't have that much of a fucking ego.
No, that's the problem, isn't it? Because like he also, I mean, The Lady in the Water is probably the best portrait of an auteur's ego I've ever seen in my life. It's so tone deaf, it's so misplaced, it's so badly wrought.
And so is the Bruce Willis cameo right at the end of Split. In the last 10 seconds, where, what did they call that guy back in the 90s? He turns around and goes, they called him Glass. First of all, you're expecting your audience to suddenly pick out their fucking head a film that you made way back then that wasn't as popular as your first film, right? 2, you're insisting upon yourself a little bit there.
Yeah.
Right? 3, this was always meant to set up the Unbreakable sequel. No, it fucking wasn't.
No, it wasn't. I mean,
it wasn't meant to set up an Unbreakable trilogy at all. You just thought to yourself, hang on, do you know what? If I give Bruce a ring, maybe he'll film this fucking 20-second cameo I've just thought of.
Yeah, and there's also like an MCU thing going on there, isn't there? So like the big thing at that point is, you're getting the burgeoning like multi-universes in cinema. And maybe I could set one of those up or some bollocks like that, you know. Yeah, it's an interesting one. M. Night Shyamalan is one of those really weird directors where I can only assume it was like collect 12 crisp packets and become a film director, because like...
What, you mean like Emmerich?
Yeah, well, you say that. Emmerich has an audience. I can see what Emmerich is going for, as bad as he is, and he is awful.
Most of Emmerich's audience are coma patients, right? And they've been induced because they've watched an Emmerich film. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, but I'm like, a Roland Emmerich film you can watch as a popcorn experience, can't you? Nobody's taking it seriously. It's bad. Going in, it's gonna be. Did I tell you I performed the Roland Emmerich experiment on myself a little while back? How did you manage that?
And basically, the plan is to watch some of his biggest films and then check off a time index on the
Uh-huh.
DVD at what point certain things happen in the
Yes.
film.
Yeah.
Independence Day,
Uh-huh.
the first alien attack takes place just as they're taking off, and he says time's up.
Mhm.
Takes place at the 40-minute mark, right?
Right.
So then I watched 2012. The
Uh-huh.
first major disaster piece takes place where the earthquake hits and he's in the limo at the 40-minute
Yeah.
mark. So I
Yeah.
thought, hang on a minute, let me watch the day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, fuck me with a fish fork, right? The 40-minute mark. And they all had the same tropes in it.
They're the
Oh,
same
divorced
formula,
dad.
yeah. They're the same film. But
It's
everything Roland Emmerich makes is the same film.
shit.
Well, that too. But when you rip away all of the incidental details, it's the same basic structure. It's the same
Oh,
basic
he's
skeleton.
an absolute hack, and
Yeah,
I would love nothing more than to ever be in a position in my life where I could bump into him one night and go, "You are a fucking hack."
it's
Sorry.
true. It's absolutely true.
Sleep tight tonight, but yeah.
But even given that, like, I can understand the appeal of those films as like popcorn absolute nonsense. Um,
Yeah, but
because
they set they set you up for disappointment because
mm,
we're finally in the grips of an apocalypse. Oh, look at it, it's a fucking washout.
yeah, it's a bit boring compared to them, isn't
It's
it? Really,
yeah,
it's a bit
great.
dull. I kind of resent the dullness of it more than anything, if I'm honest.
I resent Emmerich for raising our fucking expectations for what the apocalypse is supposed to be.
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly.
it's
Where
still down here,
are
basically.
Emmerich, where are like the meteorological phenomena that actively seem to follow human beings, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Where's that? That's not happening, is it?
It's like on my daily commute to work every day. I've not got any of that shit. I've just got some octogenarian coughing up their lungs behind me on the bus.
Right. At
That's
the
it.
very least, like, let's have at least one explosion.
At least one, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, it's usually the White House, isn't it? In
Yeah,
Emmerich's film. In fact, it's
normally.
always the White House, isn't it? Let's face it. That's one of his like. That's a trademark, isn't it?
And as schlocky and as, half baked and as at some point lazy as he
Mm.
is with the way he portrays his films,
Hmm.
the horror genre, this is how I'm working it back, the horror genre is guilty quite a lot of the time of the same fucking missteps.
Oh, it's true, yeah. That sort of reliance upon formula and whatnot. Yeah. What tends to happen is something is unexpectedly popular. It comes along and it excites the right people, basically. So people who
Yeah.
genuinely enjoy horror are attracted to it. The Blair Witch Project is the prime example of this. Like, made for nothing, you know, absolutely nothing,
Absolutely nothing, yeah.
but makes gangbusters. Still, like, relative to its budget, still one of the highest grossing films ever made,
Yeah.
you know? And suddenly they're trying to scrabble around for a formula, and the irony is it doesn't work. If you
Yeah.
try to apply formula to this stuff, it doesn't work. Part of what makes the Blair Witch Project so exceptional, it's all of the elements. It's the fact that it was directed in this very experimental way. So the actors didn't have a script. They knew vaguely what was happening. They knew vaguely that they were shooting a horror film in the middle of the woods, but the director and the writer only gave them the vaguest intimation of what was happening. That a lot of the frustration that you see on screen is genuine because
Yeah.
they actually are out there in the woods. The writer and director are like giving them less and less food, they're getting less and less sleep, and they are fucking tired and they are fucking annoyed and they do want to go home, you know? And they are hearing things in the night because it's the writer and the director running around messing
Fucking
with
about,
rocks
yeah.
and twigs
And
and
then
things, you know?
And then the studio makes the cardinal sin by then making a film,
Hmm.
a proper film, set in the universe of the Blair Witch Project, which was
Oh,
apparently the official sequel, which I heard was only second to dog shit, right?
oh, the Book of Shadows.
If that's what it was called.
It
Yeah.
is execrable. It is basically you know what happened when you watch it. The script already existed, and
Uh-huh.
they were just very quickly, oh, the Blair Witch Project is popular. Let's just slap this on it. Let's just slap that franchise on it. You know, just rework it slightly so it
Yeah.
makes a kind of sense, I
That sounds like a
suppose.
Cloverfield paradox situation.
It's execrable. And then of course you've got the 2016 remake, which in and of itself may not necessarily have been a bad found footage horror film, were it not for the fact that it has the Blair Witch Project mythology on it,
Yeah.
and it misses the point. It totally misses the point. Like, well, for example, this is the bit where I was watching it and I actively just sighed, oh fuck off. You see the witch.
All
Yeah.
right, great.
Right. So
Right. I thought. All right. Doesn't matter what I thought. All right. Go on.
yeah, it's like the rest of the film could be brilliant, and that would ruin it. The very notion that you see the witch would ruin it. And like, I mean, actually, what we were talking about earlier, found footage horror, documentary horror, one of my favorite subgenres. I'm an absolute mark for that stuff. Not in the sense that I believe it, but in the sense that I really enjoy it. You know, I love that stuff. But it is very hard to make, and it does not benefit from budget at all.
No.
The very best examples of found footage horror are the ones that have no budget. You can find tons of them on YouTube. I mean, absolutely tons of them, because anyone can make one.
Yeah. I mean, there was there's quite a bit of popular craze recently because of lockdown of like sort of doing films over Zoom.
Yeah, which I
Or
imagine is like the next evolution of found footage documentary horror. It's
yeah, or
that
like
seems
ones where
like
they're all on in a chat room and then
yeah.
something's happening in the background and they're all getting picked up one by some
Yeah,
supernatural
which
bullshit. Something
is
like
actually really fun. You know, it's actually a
that.
very good way of doing it. It's a new way of making this kind of cinema. The fun
Yeah,
of it is you are, as the audience, you're sat there like looking at every screen, trying to see if there's anything going on in
yeah,
the background, and it's kind of fun. It's it is
it
kind of
is.
fun.
It is, but like any other horror like sort of subgenre or anything like that, its shelf life is
Oh,
exceptionally limited.
it is. It is.
And it's gonna bleed itself out
Well,
basically.
for one thing, like technology itself actually puts a shelf life on it. So
Yeah,
once like Zoom is gone and the next thing comes in, that will date it automatically, won't it?
yeah,
It will
exactly.
become an artifact of this era. And I mean, some of them. I mean, did you see Host, for example?
No,
Host,
that's on our list. That's on our
yeah,
list.
Host came out on Shudder during the very depths of the pandemic, and it's a very well directed, very well structured film. It's well directed because it's actually made under lockdown conditions, so it's filmed over Zoom and
Yeah,
it's directed over Zoom. It's
right.
really quite clever. It's a well-made postmodern, not even found footage horror film, but a kind of online footage horror film.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, and I because I like this genre and because I've watched all, and when I say a lot, I mean like I've gone into like the grimy depths of like the,
Snuff films.
not snuff films, no, but like the really sort of niche Korean and Japanese found footage horror films that don't even have like an official release over here.
Yeah.
The very depths of this stuff. I came to it thinking that it was going to be more than it was.
Mm.
It's a strangely pure horror film, in that all it wants to do is scare the shit out of you. It doesn't want anything else. It doesn't have like you seen the last broadcast, yeah?
No.
No, the last broadcast is generally regarded as the very first found footage horror film.
Okay.
It's a documentary horror that came out shortly before the Blair Witch Project, but had no marketing behind it at all, so it
Okay.
didn't do very well. But it's actually very, very, very good. I would highly recommend the last broadcast. And the thing about the last broadcast and the Blair Witch Project actually is that they're not just horror films; they are commentaries on the nature of the medium. You know, they're
Mm.
actually commenting on the nature of the evolving medium. So, like, the last broadcast has all sorts of stuff in it. For the time it came out, it talks about things like internet relay chat, which was really rare at that time. It talks about like digital footage and all this kind of weird stuff. So it's talking about the
Uh,
format more than anything. Host, I thought, was going to do that because that tends to be a theme for found footage horror. You know, it does comment upon its own medium a lot.
mm.
Host doesn't do that. And I was a little bit disappointed with that because obviously that would be a good thing to do because it's over Zoom, it's over the internet, you know? There's
Yeah.
so much you could mess about with there regarding like time lapses, problems with the internet, you know, little judders and like
Yeah.
graphical breakups and things. And it doesn't really go there. It's not really trying to do that. That's not what it wants to do. It wants to scare you. And it does that pretty damn well, I've got to say. It's got some lovely set pieces in it.
Yeah.
It
I mean, I say if there was, I mean, I'll take this as an example. Like, did you see those recent Jumanji films?
I know, no. I like
Uh,
the original one, but I never saw the ones with The Rock and
yeah.
Karen Gillan in them.
apart from the fact that the way they did the characterization, it was actually really quite funny. It's the way that the actual concept updates itself. So it's gone from a
Right.
board game to a cartridge-based video.
Oh, it's a video
console.
game. Right, yeah, that
Video
makes
game
sense.
console.
That makes sense.
So they get sucked into the video
Cartridge
game,
based,
and then
because
they
that's archaic, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
God.
they become the characters in the film end up becoming the avatars in the game.
Okay.
So you've got Jack Black, who's his personality is that of an 18-year-old Instagram girl, and sort of thing like that. There are some things that are actually really, really quite well done.
Yeah.
And it's like if something can evolve and adapt with a medium, right? I would hope to say that the Ring could have been one of them. It it went from videotape. Then I think they did a remake. Where was it not updated to like a sort of a DVD disc or something like
There
that?
are quite a few films in like the original Japanese series. There's the original Ring. There's Ring Zero, which is about the origins of the whole thing, which gets really weird. And then I think there's another one as well. There's quite a few.
It would say if that could like sort of if you were talking about if you had to do a sequel, you had to do a reimagining, you had to breathe life back into this franchise that could quite happily stay dead. If Samara from the Ring could come through online digital streaming,
there's going to be like loads of like purists in the comments saying it's not Samara, it's Sadako, because that's
whatever her fucking name is. That bitch who looks really ill.
Actually, you know what? The American remake, I mean, I really like the American remake of The Ring. I think it's actually pretty damn good. It's not as... There's something about Japanese horror, and Korean horror for that matter, which is really fascinating. It has this amoral coldness to it. Because
there is a very clinical approach. Like, for example, Train to Busan, I thought was really, really well done.
Yeah.
I heard, much to my disdain, that apparently they're working on the Western remake of that. I'm not entirely sure you're going to get away with that. You know?
This is a problem as well, where there is this notion that films that exist and are popular in their original cultures and translate over. They're actually popular as they are to English-speaking audiences.
Yeah. So
that somehow. Somehow that they need to be adapted to make them more palatable. And often, very, very often, what happens is that they are diluted. They're watered down. Something fundamental is lost. It's not universally the case. There are one or two that are actually pretty good in and of themselves. And, the American remake of the Ring is pretty good. It's okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't hit the same
notes,
though, does it?
No, it doesn't have...
You can come away from it and say, that for a remake, that was right. But if you had to say for a remake, that was all right, that basically shines a light, a questionable light, on remakes
in general.
In general,
it's absolutely true, because ultimately the original is just a better experience. Go and watch the original. The thing that makes the original so interesting is exactly what we were talking about. It's reflexive of particular concerns that are happening in Japanese culture of the era. So there's the whole thing about youth, the tension between Japanese youth and older generations, which has always been a massive thing and has only escalated as time has gone on. There's a whole commentary on recording mediums, and like the way the image on screen is itself a kind of ghost. There's a whole commentary that goes on there. And what tends to happen when they're translated to another culture, the way you do it, the way you make it work when you're doing that kind of remake, is you rewrite the material so that it's reflexive of something that's going on in the target culture. And if you can do that effectively, then you can get good films. I mean, a really good example I can think of is John Carpenter's The Thing. The Thing is technically a remake. It's a readaptation of a common story. So the original short story of The Thing is Who Goes There, which is a short story, I believe, from the early 20th century. And it's one of those horror stories that's regarded as one of the core foundational texts of what becomes postmodern horror. Then you get the 1940s film, which is The Thing from Outer Space, which is the same situation, but it does away with a lot of the more biological elements. So it's just a monster. The thing that's stalking them in the snow is just a guy in a suit. It's a good film. It's a really interesting piece of work, but it's very different from what comes later. What John Carpenter does when he comes to remake it in the 80s, he doesn't only go back to the original short story, which John Carpenter's adaptation is much closer to, by the way, he also goes to what's happening in 80s culture. So what is happening in the USA and the UK and like the Western world in general in the 1980s? You've got the whole Cold War thing. So that's there. That is definitely there. There's a Cold War element to John Carpenter's The Thing. You've got the escalating awareness of things like cancer and basically every disease imaginable. You also have the news media latching onto that and using it to terrify their audiences, basically. And the thing,
like they did with the AIDS
right?
AIDS
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, John Carpenter's The Thing is such an AIDS film. It is such an AIDS film, and it's also a cancer film. It's reflexive of all this stuff, and that's why it works. It's been remade to reflect the concerns of the era. One of the big problems with remakes is they often don't do that. I mean, you know how like in the early 2000s we had this absolute slew of horror remakes, just an absolute slew of them. Almost every single one doesn't reinvent itself sufficiently to the point whereby you've got some of them that are just shot-for-shot remakes of the original, but with a sharper.
What, you mean like Psycho with Vince Vaughn?
Yeah, right, with a slightly younger cast. So, and you sit there watching it and you think, well, why not just watch the original? The Omen is probably the best example. Now, the remake of The Omen isn't necessarily a bad film because it's just the original film, remade shot for shot, but with a younger cast.
Yeah, but there's no. You've seen it, so where's the excitement? What's grabbing your attention? You've already seen the fucking film.
That's exactly true. And again, you get that whole problem with cultural resonance. So, the original Omen, made in the 1970s, has all sorts of political shit in it. All sorts of stuff about moral panics, conservatism, just so much going on that does not exist in the late 1990s, early 2000s remake. In fact, the late 1990s, early 2000s remake is this hollow affair because it just it's not sufficiently rewritten to reflect the concerns of those eras. It doesn't actually say anything. It's just The Omen. It's just a story. And in that regard, kind of empty and pointless.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a weird thing. It seems to be what's missed again and again and again and again when it comes to sequels, when it comes to remakes. It can work. We've seen how it can work,
Yeah, but it's few and far between it ever happens. And when it does happen, it's like lightning in a bottle.
It is. It's very rare. Often it happens by accident, because that's how the original lightning in a bottle happens. It's often you can't contrive it, and that's what studios.
Paranormal Activity was apparently. Right. I mean, I didn't see it, but apparently it was quite a popular film.
It was popular, and I can see why. I can understand why. For me, it didn't really work. Again, it's because of my history with found footage films, which I love, The problem with Paranormal Activity for me is that it is too much of a film. Unlike the Blair Witch Project, it is scripted, it is directed, the lines and the scenes are blocked, Yeah. So for me, for documentary or found footage horror, that's the kiss of death.
Yeah. So then get to the point where you've got Paranormal Activity 4.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's not so much Paranormal Activity now, isn't it? Surely something's going on.
Yeah, I mean...
It's not unusual.
One thing I will say for the Paranormal Activity sequels, they do really earnestly try to create a wider mythology for the film series. I will say that. It doesn't need it. No, it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't need it.
It goes back to the original thing of what we're talking about. And something else I wanted to talk about. Not every horror film needs to be explored.
No.
Like an alien anal probe.
Yeah,
right?
And that's not just horror either. That's something that's happening in not just cinema, but in like media in general, where there is this entire tradition now of taking elements that don't require explanation or backstory and making films out of it. Trying to do exactly that, and in doing so, murdering the ethos and the mystique of the original phenomena. A really good example of it. This phenomena at the moment of taking Disney villains, like fairy tale villains, and
then giving them a whole
origin story. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work on so many levels. The Maleficent one is probably the best example I can think of. I hate that film. I really hate it. You look at Maleficent in the original Disney adaptation of Sleeping Beauty,
Mm.
and she's just like elemental evil. She's
Yeah.
really impressive. She's essentially the devil, She's
Yeah.
really impressive, really powerful. She doesn't have any motivation other than the fact that she's evil. She's
Yeah.
her own entity. The Maleficent film is this bizarrely misogynistic take on that, where it reduces her. The reason she's so bad is because she was jilted and by a male character. She becomes a reflection of a male character,
Oh,
and it's
lovely.
like. And that happens all the time. Did you see there was sort of around the same era there was that Wizard of Oz prequel, Oz the Great and Powerful, that
No, no.
Sam Raimi
The thing
did.
is, I don't tend to watch Disney films if I can avoid
Right.
them.
Well, Sam
But
Raimi did that, and I thought it would be pretty good, so I did go and see it. It's really not. It gives you again an origin story for the Wicked Witch of the West, and again she's only evil because a man jilts her, and it's like,
yeah,
for God's sake, the misogyny of this. These characters can't be their own entities. They can't have like a genuine backstory. The only reason they can be powerful and their own entities is because of they're reacting to a male character.
yeah.
It's like,
I
oh
mean,
my
I,
god.
I've got two Disney films that I will watch. Right, one
Hmm.
is Robin Hood
Oh
because
god, the original
it's
one.
fucking amazing. It's hilarious.
Hmm.
And two is The Fox and the Hound. With the
Ah,
exception of occasionally Dumbo, if I'm feeling particularly morose, the rest of them
I
can
like
fuck off.
Dumbo.
Not because I think Disney as a overarching evil corporation
Which it is,
needs
yeah.
to be taken down somewhat. It's just that I can't really get behind the works of a man who was a Nazi sympathiser, and
Right, yeah,
I
there
love
is
telling
that.
people that.
There is
Sorry.
definitely that. I mean, I have quite a soft, like most people, I've got a fairly soft spot for most of the Disney films, but that doesn't mean I can't see like the problems with that and with
Yeah.
them, with them in general. I mean, you get it in the this current phenomenon with the live action remakes. They don't work.
No.
None of them work. None of them work.
I've
And
I've not been tempted by any of them. I heard that they were doing Robin Hood, and I thought, don't you
yeah,
fucking dare.
yeah, they
Don't do
will.
it.
They'll do them all. They'll do every single one of them. They're terrible. They are absolutely terrible. And people are being hoodwinked by their own nostalgia into thinking they're not. They're terrible because they are stories that are written to be told in a particular medium.
Yeah.
They require all of that exaggeration and those over the top reactions and
Mm.
colors that cartoons have, The
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast one is the best example of this. Now, I really like the original Disney adaptation of Beauty and the Beast. I think not only is it really beautiful, like the animation and everything is gorgeous,
Mm.
it's actually a really subtle parody of Disney films up to that point. Most specifically, The Little Mermaid. It actually, when you watch it back to back with The Little Mermaid, it takes everything The Little Mermaid does and inverts it and pokes
Mm.
fun at it in a really subtle way. It's very, very good. The live action remake takes all of the charm out of it. It uses basically the same script, but it takes the charm and the chemistry and the beauty out of everything. I saw a critique of it by what I can't remember who it was, but quite a prominent critic who said, "Well, Emma Watson may as well be acting against furniture for all the chemistry she's got with everyone else." And that's absolutely true. It also does this thing where it tries to complexify what does not need complexifying. So
Yeah.
everyone has a backstory in it, and I mean fucking
Yeah.
everyone.
Oh, actually, hang on. Yeah. I did see that one. I
And
did.
I'm like,
But it was on in the background. I wasn't paying attention
yeah,
just to keep my street cred respectable.
I don't need to know why the sorceress who causes the enchantment is doing what she's doing. I don't need to know.
Well,
I don't need to know that the prince is a spoiled brat because of his parents and they're not that great. I don't need to know that Gaston has PTSD because he was in a war. I don't want to know this stuff. The people who are writing this shit, they think that they're doing something revolutionary and that they're complexifying the material. They're
no,
not.
they're not.
They're
They're
not.
not.
What
I
they're
mean,
doing is undermining the fairy tale and mythological resonance. So Gaston is really interesting in the original story, in the original Disney adaptation, because he is essentially the inversion of every Disney Prince Charming.
yeah,
He's actually a parody of that archetype. If you look at his animation model, he's Prince Eric from The Little Mermaid. He's just blown up.
yeah. Oh,
He's all the
don't make me go back and
entitlement.
watch that and draw comparisons. Like,
It's
don't make
good.
me
I
do it.
mean, it is actually. I mean, I even for all the problems with it, I even like The Little Mermaid. I've got a real soft spot for that film. Again, it's really pretty. It's really beautiful. But by God, is it problematic?
Yeah,
By God, is it problematic? This frankly ditzy 16-year-old who convinces herself that she falls in love with the first human being she sees and doesn't even know who he is or what he is, and fundamentally changes herself and abandons her entire life for him. And he
yeah.
can't even be asked with her until he realizes that she sings in a particular way. It's like, oh my God, this is really
Willing to
problematic.
shipwreck himself on a fucking rock, is he, for her? I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, if the Little Mermaid did anything for me, I think that was about the time I started eating fish. So,
Right, right. I mean, it's a good thing they probably didn't adapt the original story, because the original Hans Christian Andersen story, she dies. It's a
oh,
really
lovely.
sad story. She doesn't get back with the prince. It
Well,
doesn't
actually,
happen
no,
that
no.
way.
Do you know what? Maybe they should have had the courage of their convictions and said, "Fuck it, we're doing that one."
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. There are other pieces of work that have adapted those stories and have stuck to them. My best example of that is that wonderful Jim Henson series from the 1980s, The Storyteller.
Oh yeah, Jesus, I've not thought of that for years.
Oh, I got the DVD recent, and I'm telling you, I loved them as a kid. I loved them, and I was well prepared for them to be maybe a bit not quite as good.
Yeah,
They're they are so beautiful. Those adaptations, they are so clever. The way they're done, they're told in this like dreamy abstract style where that like certain parts of them are told in silhouette, and you'll see like a plate that's hung on the wall, like an ornamental plate, and it will start to animate, and it's so pretty.
mm.
But it keeps all the darkness as well. So the negative endings of the grim fairy tales, which are generally pretty negative, it's all there. It's all there. They do not rewrite them to make them more palatable,
Yeah.
which I appreciate, because again, that was aimed at like a family audience. It was aimed at children essentially.
Hmm.
And of course, you've got John Hurt as the storyteller, who
Oh,
is,
brilliant. Oh
you
yeah, yeah.
know, he is amazing in that role. I mean, absolutely incredible. There was a sequel series. There was a
I didn't
sequel.
know.
Yeah, yeah. There was. It only ran for like 6 episodes, I think, and it's Michael Gambon is the storyteller in that one.
Really?
Yeah, and it's the Greek myths,
Okay.
and again, all the darkness is in there. All the darkness. So like they do Orpheus and Eurydice, and that's a pretty damn dark story. I mean, Orpheus at the end ends up being beheaded and then hacked to death by mad women, and that's in
We've all
it.
been
That
there.
Yeah, it actually happens. That is actually in the story. The saddest one is the tale of Icarus and Daedalus.
Ah, yes.
It's a really horrific story, that one, and everything is in there. Well, two children die in that story, and a lot of other people get murdered as well. It's a nasty story, but it's all in there, and it's Derek Jacobi as Daedalus, so it's pretty
Cool.
fucking good.
I might hunt that down at some point.
You can get it. I'm sure it's up on YouTube. If you typed in the Storyteller, I'm sure you'd find it.
Cool.
But they're both well worth seeking out. They've got not amazing production values, but they've made like a benefit of that somehow. They feel very theatrical and very fairy tale. It's really cool. I love those stories. I watch them at least once a year, every year now,
Hmm.
because they're pretty. They're so, so beautiful. But that's how you adapt stories well.
Kind of
That's how
reminds
you
me.
do it
That's
well.
that sounds to me a little bit like when the BBC did adaptations of the plays of Shakespeare, and every single play was done in a completely different animation style.
Yeah.
Like it was like really quite sort of its own thing, and
Hmm.
each one, that's how you sort of separated Well, because Shakespeare can fucking blur from one into the next.
Yeah, it does tend to happen, doesn't it?
Mm.
Well, he uses archetypes, Shakespeare. That's the thing. He uses very particular archetypes that recur quite frequently
Like
in his
Emmerich.
fiction.
So
You
there we
just
are.
compared Shakespeare to Emmerich,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Emmerich to Shakespeare.
Yeah. Fuck the pair of them. Yeah.
Oh man, God, there's going to be purists on here who are going to be like,
Good, good. I'm
it
all
is
about
YouTube.
challenging opinions.
It is YouTube. It is YouTube, and actually, you know what? I was talking to one of the other people I do podcasts with recently, and I've managed to generally avoid most of the more negative stuff. I don't often get like the trolling comments or whatnot.
No, I don't get any of those. Really, I've not had one of those for probably about 10 years now, and I think to
Yeah,
myself, have we lost our touch?
yeah, yeah.
Is
Just
there
not
something we should be doing that we're not
right.
doing
Just not
to
attracting them anymore.
upset people a little bit?
Yeah, just not attracting them anymore. The most I get are people who get annoyed about like the video game Let's Plays when you're not getting something or you're not doing it quite correctly.
Do you know what? It's funny because when you were playing Visage,
Oh God,
me and
yeah,
Jim were sitting there going, "Well, go back and pick that up." And sort of
yeah,
blah, blah. And then he'd walk off in the opposite direction.
yeah.
It's like, no, no, George, go. I said to Joe, I'm going to message him. And I said to Joe, no, I can't message him because
It's already been done. Yeah,
he's already played the fucking game and put it on
yeah,
YouTube. So anything I send at this point now is going to be
yeah.
null and void.
I did have to look up a walkthrough for that game. I'll be totally honest. I had to look up a
Well,
walkthrough
you
because
hit it well. So
it is oblique. I mean, it's part of the experience. I would say it does not hold your hand. It doesn't tell you anything.
mm,
Basically, I mean, like Dolores's chapter, fairly. Once you've found the mirrors and the hammer, it's
yeah.
fairly straightforward. You know pretty much what you've got to do. Getting the order of the mirrors is bloody hard, especially when Dolores keeps turning up and knifing you.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling that the way her chapter ended, I thought it was going to go that way, but I
Yeah,
thought
it was
uh,
sad, wasn't it? It was really sad.
and just suddenly, oh fuck, I thought because you're looking at her through the wall, aren't you?
Yeah,
And I thought, okay, one of two things is going to happen here. She's either going to kill herself, or you're going to watch her kill the kid.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like, oh my God, they're not going to go there, are they?
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Mm.
We stuck with it. I think we enjoyed Layers of Fear probably slightly more.
Oh,
Uh,
Layers of Fear was a
because
proper revelation. Scared the shit
because
out of me.
Layers of Fear, I think that the pacing in Visage while you're sort of wandering around in
Mm.
circles trying to work out what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah,
I think the pacing in Visage sort of stumbles a little bit
yeah,
because it doesn't signpost what you need to do.
that's right. I mean, and you do reach points like Lucy's chapter, for example.
Mm.
I could not get away from that bloody
She was
ghost.
difficult,
I
Jesus.
could not figure out what I had to do to stop her from killing me, and she's always there. Dolores, once you figure out what you've got to do with Dolores, which is look away from her.
Yeah.
If you look away and move away from Dolores, she disappears, and that's how you deal with her. Rakan, fairly easy because you can hear him coming on his crutches.
Yeah,
He's
you just got to outrun him.
right. You just outrun him, but Lucy is always right behind you. She's fast, and she can often appear in front of you as well.
Yeah, well, that's
It's
what we liked about it was we discovered. Hang on, so the same trope, what worked for one ghost
yeah.
isn't going to work for the next one,
Oh, it's
and
very clever. I mean, like
that's yeah,
the way it plays with styles of horror. What it's basically doing is taking certain archetypes from independent horror video gaming and weaving them into itself and saying, actually, we can do it all in one game and do it better than these games. So
but
Rakan is Outlast. It's a reference to
yes, it
Outlast.
is, yeah, absolutely is, yeah.
Lucy is Fatal Frame, which is another horror game that features a little girl ghost with the hair draped over her face that skitters weirdly and a camera, you know.
Mm,
Dolores, I don't know what Dolores is a specific reference to, but I certainly recognise the archetype, you know.
yeah. But you said that there was 4 chapters in that, but we swear blind you only played 3.
Yeah, there are 4 chapters, but the fourth one is Dwayne's. It's the hub world.
Oh,
That's what I figure. I couldn't figure it out, so I had to look it up. There are multiple endings to the game. Most of them are pretty damn dark. But if you in Dwayne's chapter, if you can find all the videotapes,
uh-huh.
as I eventually did, if you can find all of the empty frames and if you can find all of the portions of the mirror mask, then you get the proper ending.
Okay.
It takes forever. It's really hard.
See,
and obscure.
So, horror games seem to be doing it so well. So why isn't horror cinema?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, there are... Again, it's one of those things, like, independent horror cinema is doing pretty well. There's some fairly good stuff out there at the moment, and really interesting stuff as well, like His House on Netflix, I thought was really good, really beautiful.
His House? I wonder if
it explores, it takes, like, the trope of the haunted house and all that nonsense, but it applies it to the experience of refugees in the UK.
Oh, no, we haven't watched it. We wanted to.
It's really good. It's really good.
The early 80s or something like that.
Yeah, it's very good. I enjoyed it.
They've been moved into a shit old fucking estate.
That's right. And I just love the commentary of it. So it's like they've brought the ghosts of their culture with them.
Mm.
But the way the film comes out, it's almost as though it's saying, it compares and contrasts the horrors that are occurring in their home with the cold, grim, soulless horror of the UK itself outside.
Yeah, which is endless.
Yeah, and it basically seems to be saying almost like, well, the spiritual and metaphysical horrors of this world are way better than the cold and sterile sink estate, horrors of the UK. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was a brilliant commentary.
All right, so independent horror might be doing quite well for itself now, but if it wasn't for a pandemic when no one's allowed to fucking go outside the front door without fear of killing your octogenarian next door neighbour, no one will be watching this shit.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. You've got to get the good horror stuff at the moment. You've got to go niche. There are a few rare examples, like, I was hoping that for all of its relative quality or lack thereof, the high profile and the fact that it made so much bloody money, I thought like the new adaptation of Stephen King's It would open the floodgates and you would get like a new slew of horror. Hasn't really happened.
Well, no, probably not in the way they wanted it to.
And I mean,
if
part
things
of
start
that,
settling down, then maybe, yeah.
Part of that maybe.
I want a proper adaptation of the Langoliers.
Yeah.
One that doesn't look like it was painted on the back of a microwave.
You will never get an adaptation of the Langoliers because the Langoliers is shit.
It is shit. But the adaptation I watched, like,
the 1990s one is great.
It's ropey as fuck.
It's so bad. It's
right?
It's one of those watches I will go back to again and again because it's so bad.
It's ropey as fuck. But there is certain imagery. There's certain imagery or there's certain suggestions in that film which actually, when I watched it, made me go, "That's fucking nasty."
The setup is great. Like the setup, the concept of like waking up on a plane and everyone's gone, and the notion of like the sound you can hear in the distance and that everything is inert, everything is dead.
Yeah.
Love it to bits. Setup brilliant. Payoff,
not so much. No.
Absolute wankery.
King, isn't it? So, yeah.
I mean, like absolute wankery. I mean, just like the worst concept imaginable. But what I love about the 1990s adaptation is the fact that it's a Sky One product, so it's like so 1990s. It's unbelievable.
There we are. Yeah.
It's
TV
like
movie of the week.
Right. It is pure canned Crystal Pepsi 1990s, isn't it? And I love that. I love
Without
it to
the
bits. Without the allure, right? It's got some of the worst acting I've ever seen.
It really has.
In a TV product. I love the guy from Third Rock from the Sun who plays Craig Toomey. The guy who loses his mind, basically.
Yeah.
Love him. The way the characters talk to one another, they talk to one another in this very literary way where they're explaining everything. It's like.
Have you ever watched Suits?
No.
Okay, so that reference is going to be lost
Sorry.
on you. It's basically the show set in a law firm in America, and two people will be in the scene, and they'll talk to each other in the scene about something, and then the very next scene will be another two characters describing basically the conversation that the previous two characters have just had.
God, that's just bad writing.
It's fucking shocking.
That's just bad writing, that is. But yeah, that's what the Langoliers does. But because it's so ridiculously overblown, it's actually really funny.
Yeah, I've always had a very love-hate relationship with King's work
Yeah,
because
likewise.
he's got some great ideas,
Hmm.
but very often, and we've discussed this before,
Yep.
his ability to actually end a story in any way convincingly has always been his letdown. And I was looking forward to It Chapter 2.
Oh, me too. I
And
love the
for the
first
most
one.
part, as a film, it's not offensive.
No.
There's one part in it, and I don't know if it's in the book or not because I've not read the book for years, but
Hmm.
there's one part in there where obviously King's managed to shoehorn in herself a fucking cameo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And McAvoy is like playing an author that struggles to like sort of write endings and sort of things like that. So I
Uh-huh.
thought I'm going to let that one go for now, right? And then he goes into the shop and he talks about, oh, I sort of read your book. Oh yeah, what did you think about? Oh, I didn't like the ending. I thought to myself,
Yeah.
you can fuck right off, right? Because if you're acknowledging here in the here and now, right, that you've got a
Yeah.
problem with fucking ending your stories, right?
Uh-huh.
You do not get a free pass by that acknowledgement at all. At all.
I mean, like, I mean, I've discussed this with like my friend Kit Power, another writer. We do the podcast "What the Hell Is Wrong with
Mm.
Us," and we talked about both of the It films. We liked the original one,
Yeah.
like the not the 1990s one, but like the first film. You
Yeah.
know, the I thought it was actually really good. I thought it was a really good fun sort of like popcorn summer blockbuster horror movie. I loved Skarsgård as Pennywise. I thought he was brilliant.
Yeah.
I thought the kids were all really good. It's a shame because part of the problem is that it's an issue with the source material because
Always.
the stuff with the kids is all gold. It's all really good. The stuff with the adults isn't that great,
No.
and that's exactly
No.
what happens in
And
the
the
film.
adults, they had a good cast.
Yeah, they did. They had a good cast. It just the big problem with the sequel, I feel, is that it fell victim to the original film's success. They did not realize the first film was going to do gangbusters like it did. And you know, it's one of the highest grossing horror films ever.
Wow, fair play.
It did really well. They did not realize that it was going to be that successful. As a result, the studio execs descended on the sequel.
Mm.
You can see it. You can see it when you see the film. They were clearly saying this is darker than the original one. You can't do that. We need to put more jokes in it. We need to do this. We need to do that. Part of the problem with the sequel, the follow-up, is the tone is really problematic all the way through. So you've got these really dark subjects coming up, stuff like suicide, homophobic assault, murder. You know, all that stuff is in there. All then diluted by gags, like silly, not even Sam Raimi level horror gags.
Yeah.
And it's like, just
One-liners that
stop
don't hit
it.
the mark.
Right,
Yeah.
stop it. Just stop it. It worked in the first film because it focused on the children. You know?
Mm.
That works in that context. When you've got the adults here, make it an adult horror film. That
Exactly.
would have
Yeah.
been
You
a
need to,
great way
if it's
of
going to be dark,
distinguishing the two.
make it dark.
Right.
One film that I didn't think was too bad, but I again it falls into the same trope of didn't need to be made, was fucking what was that fucking film, the sequel to The Shining?
Oh,
Doctor
Doctor
Sleep.
Sleep. Doctor Sleep. Yeah, the film I thought was okay. You know, it was fine. It didn't like set my world on fire, but I thought it was okay.
I
Now
know.
the book I hated.
I took issue with the film not because maybe I'm explaining this the wrong way, but
Mm.
I didn't feel that there was any continuation left in Danny Torrance's story
No,
after the
no.
first film. So to flash forward 30 years where he's crippling
Yeah.
with alcohol addiction that because he can't get a fucking handle after 30 years on his fucking abilities, right?
Right.
And then they keep teasing little things here and there, blah, blah, and it made you sit through the whole film just to take
Yeah.
it all the way back to the fucking hotel. Now, to be fair
Right.
to them, the recreation of the hotel was fucking amazing, right?
Yeah.
In a state of decay and sort of thing like that. But I thought, no, the hotel story is done.
Right. Ironically, I mean, the book doesn't do that. It doesn't go back to the hotel at all. But I really didn't like it. I mean, part of the reason I didn't like it is because the book is like, and I think this is really deliberate. So people who liked King's early stuff, like the original Shining, will probably really like Doctor Sleep. But it felt like all of King's greatest hits, like all melded together in one book. So it has if you listed all of the tropes that come up in a Stephen King book, they're in this book.
Oh,
So
lovely.
you've got like the magic ethnic character the shaman ethnic character who knows everything about what's going on
Yeah.
and informs the main character in there. The bully who has no motivation and is just a dick for no reason, it's in there. The main character who has alcoholism, reflecting King's own problems with alcohol and prescription drugs, it's in there. You know, the psychic child, it's in there.
Yeah.
It's all there, you know, it's all rolled in there. And I was reading it, I was thinking, like, I don't want to read The Shining again. I don't want to read The Stand again. I don't want, you know, we've done this. Let's move on to something good, you know.
Yeah,
It just did nothing for me. It did nothing for me. That said, there have been the stuff that King's come out with more recently that has been absolutely brilliant. You know, absolutely stunning. His short story collections, Just After Sunset and Everything's Eventual, are amazing.
yeah, but wait until he writes sequels to them, then there'll be an issue.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the assumption that he lives another 60 years, you know.
Yeah, I hope he does, because I find him amusing. I think, you know, he's a weird one. I like King as a guy, you know, and I think he's a very positive force in publishing and writing and whatnot. I think he's a very positive force. I'm hit and miss with his work. There's some stuff I love, like the Dark Tower series. I absolutely love.
I love Misery. I thought that book was
Misery, Dolores Claiborne. You know, I loved all that stuff. I really enjoyed that.
But I don't want to read a sequel to Misery.
No.
Fucking, or watch a sequel where fucking the offspring of both James Caan and Kathy Bates fucking meet up somewhere. I was like, I don't want any contrived bullshit.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Sleep was just fucking contrived from the moment it started to the moment it finished.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like the book for similar reasons. You know, it just didn't hit me. It didn't do anything for me. It's a real shame.
I mean, the last time I saw Ewan McGregor that bored, he was in Star Wars, you know.
Yeah, doing his like worst Alec Guinness impression.
Counting off Alec Guinness, yeah, brilliant. Yeah. We can all do that.
Yeah, anybody. Basically, everyone who was born. TFN. Everybody's done it. Oh man. But yeah, I mean, currently there is a new series of The Standout, isn't there?
Is there? Oh, okay.
By all accounts, yeah.
I'm still trying to get through American Horror Story. That's a fucking trial.
Yeah. American Horror Story. First 2 seasons are really good. After that,
do you know what? I had issues with the first series.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
It really isn't. You know, in the fact that we watched the first 2 episodes, and they pushed so much into those first 2 episodes, right? That I took a couple of weeks off from watching it because I was doing other shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went back and we said, "What episode are we on?" I went, "Oh fuck it, we're only on episode 3."
Yeah.
Because of how much the pacing of that series, at least in the beginning, was fucking off the charts.
Yeah, that is a problem that's consistent in American Horror Story. It tries to like cram together so much stuff. Sometimes it works. Like season 2, Asylum, I loved.
No, I enjoyed that. But
I really enjoyed Asylum. I thought the way it married like certain myths of American culture all together.
Yeah.
Urban myths from like alien abduction, like implanted pregnancies, the serial killer, the actual history of insane asylums themselves.
Yeah, I just kind of
thought it was really clever.
I just kind of felt season 2 didn't approach it. Season 2 felt to me like it was pitched like this, right? A few guys sitting around a room, off their fucking nut on whatever, right? And one of them went, "Bear with me, lads," right?
Right.
Alien abductions with unassuming non-demonic possession.
Yeah.
In an insane asylum.
In an insane asylum with serial killers. Yeah. The
ending for season 1, the last episode, me and Jen thought was all over the place because the scene that we've said that's the end scene happens in the first 20 minutes where the new families walk around and all the ghosts decide to get together and haunt them out of the house.
And
it ended on a slightly light note and we went, hang on, that was your end scene right there.
Mm-hmm.
So what the fuck is this other 40 minutes that you've got us watching?
Yes.
Where it all seems like it's been edited out of order. Series 2's finale had a very, very tonal, strange shift to it. It's like, well, hang on a minute, what about all the weird things in the grounds that you've been leading up to, and sort of like you did nothing with those, and then you're going to have this final confrontation between Sarah Paulson, who's looking more and more like a fucking melted doll, and the guy who turns out to be her son, there's no build up to that because they kept doing this flashback to the present day thing, and they cut it off. But there's the flashbacks to the present day were so few and far between, we forgot that plot line was actually going on.
Yeah, there's a well. Wait till you get to the later seasons. If you do that shit gets way worse. It gets way worse. 3, I fucking hated.
Season
I
3
hated
had a couple
it.
of interesting notes in it. Season
Like,
3 felt like an adult version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
yeah, it really did, and that's what I didn't like about it. I think it had great concepts, like the ideas it was playing with, like the history of witchcraft and voodoo, married to slavery and racism in the USA, married to misogyny in US culture. Brilliant, really cool. Hated all of the characters, like all of them. Could not stand a one of them.
Was kind of hoping that that's a running theme though throughout the series that I've seen so far. I'm waiting for one redeemable character. I was kind of hoping that the Down syndrome girl Nan in the 3rd series was actually going to be the character you rooted for, and then she just arbitrarily kills the next door neighbour.
Yeah, and becomes actually quite hateful.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, you're taking that one away as well.
Almost all of them are hateful, and I hate. You know what else I hated as well? That notion, and this is something I hate in almost every mythology that does it, including fucking Harry Potter, by the way. The notion of magic being this inborn thing, like an X-Man power.
Yeah,
it's like fucking no. If you're gonna do ritual magic, occult magic, it's learned.
You need to learn it. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's a discipline.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not, and also giving the witches a specific power like the fucking X-Men. It's like no.
I've got to say the real saving grace so far throughout all of it has been Jessica Lange. She's been absolutely mesmerizing.
Anything.
I've got to say that the one thing that all the characters have played so far is they're either drunk and incredibly bitter, or just incredibly bitter, and she does it fantastically.
Yeah. She's so good at it, though, isn't she? She just plays those characters.
Awards for it as well, doesn't she? So
yeah, well, she is so good. She carries even the bad seasons. She does. Like the 4th season, the Freak Show, is pretty bad for the most part.
I've only got one episode through that so far, and I wasn't convinced.
She's awesome in it. It's worth sticking with because she's got some set pieces in that are fucking amazing. Okay, picture this: Jessica Lange dressed as Ziggy Stardust in the 1950s.
Yeah, all right. Why not?
Singing "Life on Mars."
All right.
In a freak show tent.
Sure. All right, I'll get on board with that. Why not? It won't be the most ridiculous fucking thing I've ever seen.
Later on, she sings a Lana Del Rey song.
Right.
Right, and it's just like Gods and Monsters. She sings Gods and Monsters by Lana Del Rey. And it's like the anachronism of it works. Somehow it really, really works. She's a bomb in that season. She is absolutely brilliant. The rest of it is up and down.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
There are moments that are good. There are some storylines I really like. Others, it's just like, just try to tell a simple story well, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got like 8 seasons on Netflix. Apparently, series 9 is being filmed at the moment, or has been.
Apparently so.
But apparently it's been renewed up to season 13.
Oh God! I mean, it really starts to fall apart.
I was going to say this could be one of the things where outstaying its welcome is very much like sort of stamped all over it.
Yeah. Pretty much. It's annoying because it always has interesting ideas. The concepts and the situations are always interesting. A lot of the characters are even interesting, you know? It just tends to do nothing with them. Like, Kathy Bates, she is wasted in every season. She's completely wasted. If you're going to have Kathy Bates, she's the focus, you know? Give her a story arc that's worth a damn.
Well, I thought that's what they were going to do with those series 3, but then they sort of...
They just didn't.
They
just didn't. You know, in fact, she's got no arc at all. She ends as she begins, you know?
Yeah.
There's just, like, no point to it.
No growth there at all.
No, she's kind of comic relief, and that's it, isn't it?
Yeah. So, as a closing thing, then, where do you think horror cinema is going? Because for the most part it needs to get itself out of the tropes that it's been insisting on falling into time and time again.
Well, we are now at a point where historically in the aftermath of situations like the ones we're going through now, horror has an efflorescence.
Yeah.
It acts as kind of like
Palate cleanser.
yeah, well, not only that, it's a cultural nightmare. So it serves the same functions that nightmares do. It allows for a kind of subconscious processing of trauma, and that's what tends to happen. You tend to get like eruptions of mainstream horror in the aftermath of situations like those we're going through now. It doesn't tend to happen until after those situations have tapered off a little bit. So we may have to wait a little while before we start getting. And when I say like I don't want to call them pandemic horror films because that doesn't mean that what they're going to be are stories about pandemics or anything like that. What I imagine we're going to see are stories that reflect the cultural climate in one way or another, that kind of allow us to process the trauma of it in one way or another. So horror could be in a good place very soon. We could even see, best case scenario, we could even see another golden age of it, as we did in the aftermath of the truly horrific stuff that was going on in the USA in the 1960s and all the way through the 70s up to the 80s, you know?
I mean, what I will say is, for me, I want a couple of very, very simple rules. One, no more fucking Rob Zombie Halloween films. At all.
No more. I'm sorry, but
in fact, let's just go a little bit broader there. No more Rob Zombie films.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I would want to.
Strip away the budgets, make things a little bit more intimate, because you can do a lot more when you've got no money, because you actually got to use your fucking imagination. And three, if you're going to make any remakes at all, then give me my fucking Maniac Cop remake that I've been waiting for since 1993, right? When I watched Maniac Cop 3, and they teased Maniac Cop 4, and they never fucking did it. Chucky got 17 films, Michael Myers got 25 films, Matt Cordell deserves another fucking outing. Because he's the only character that I have ever come across in like sort of slasher fiction or blah 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 that genuinely terrified me.
You know, I mean, I know like the Maniac Cop films, they're really fun, they're really good, but they are like really schlocky B-movie horror.
Absolutely,
they're really fun. They're really fun. Now you could take the premise of Maniac Cop and actually make it really culturally reflexive. Like with what's going on in culture now, you know, the whole Black Lives Matter protest. We've got what's going on in the UK now.
At the moment, yeah. Perfect.
It could be really interesting, couldn't it? You could do stuff with that material.
And despite the fact it was schlocky and B-movie as all hell, and fuck it, had Bruce Campbell in it, so of course, right?
Well, of course.
But
I mean,
Matt
what would you
Cordell
expect?
As a character, the fact that his stature is imposing, you never ever saw him, apart from like in the first film towards the end, but you never ever saw him in any, what you were saying, going into any kind of natural light. Everything was in shadow, everything was a play on shadow and things like that. And the silhouette and everything like that, the fact that he's always there, fucking terrifying. If I'm going to have a nightmare about any kind of horror trope, it's always him that's there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think you could do. I think that subject has real legs now. I think you could do something with the Maniac Cop franchise and make it really interesting.
Yeah, but it can't just be a retread of what came before, because it wouldn't work in today's audiences or market anyway.
I mean, like,
it has to be really considered.
Like the cultural place of the police officer has changed.
Yeah.
Completely, thanks to recent events, it's changed completely. So yeah, it would have to be different.
Yeah.
It would have to be something different.
Give it all the social commentary you want, but it has to be genuinely scary. Because for me, he always was.
Yeah,
so if I don't get that sense of dread from it, obviously they're gonna have to recast it because Robert Zadar died, and you know, but then again, he was ancient by that point. It has to be someone of I don't know, similar stature or whatever. But if it doesn't have that same level of intensity or fear, then for me it's just going to fall flat. It's last I'm going to go. I can't get on board with it.
It can't just be like a schlocky remake. It isn't going to work, you know. I mean, you know, I just thought of a remake of a popular horror franchise that I rather enjoyed on its own merits, which was the Evil Dead remake.
Which, you know what, we're watching that at the moment.
It's all right. It's fun. It's got this wry knowledge. Like there was a sequence that made me laugh out fucking loud, where like the shot is recessed away from the actors. The actors are in the background and they're almost blurred out. And one of them like finds an electric carving knife and just puts it right in the foreground. So the camera is still and focused on this electric carving knife, and it's like it's saying to the audience,
Yeah. Well,
I think we're
gonna watch Evil Dead, Army of Darkness tonight.
Yeah.
But we're gonna then go back and then watch, because we're watching season 3 of Ash versus the Evil Dead. We're about halfway
really
through it, and I said, no, if we're gonna do this properly, because we started with Evil Dead 1 and 2 last night.
Yeah.
Let's watch number 3, then let's do
Yeah.
seasons 1, 2, and then finish season 3 as well. If we're gonna do it, we'll do it
absolutely.
Right.
Go and do it properly. I loved Ash versus the Evil Dead. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed every moment of it.
It's a shame that they cancelled it.
Yeah, right. Happening a lot, isn't it, with really good series at the moment, unfortunately. I mean, some of them I even understand. You know, some of them I even understand. Like, they cancelled The Dark Crystal, for example, which was one of the best series I've seen for years. But the reason they had to cancel it is because you literally can't film it under current circumstances. It's impossible. It is absolutely impossible. So I kind of understand. You know, it makes me sad, but I get it.
Lots of little girlfriends walking along with fucking surgical masks on. Brilliant. I'd see that. I'd watch that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a difficult subject, isn't it, horror? I mean, you just brought up the Evil Dead 2 is essentially a remake of The Evil Dead, isn't it? And
it is, but
works.
It's clever how it basically retreads the first film within the first 10 minutes. And then goes from there. So it's sort of a remake, but it's not. It's
quite.
A sequel at the same time. I said to Jen last night, he put Bruce Campbell through the ringer in the first film, and then imagine Bruce Campbell just to be told, basically we're doing the first film again, but we've got a little bit more money this time. And he must have sat and gone, well, fuck.
Yeah, now we've got like this big scaffolding that we can spin you around on and whatnot. I
wonder how much, we were wondering how much of his own stunts that he's involved with in like sort of...
Oh, have you never seen the making of all of them?
No, what in Ash vs Evil Dead?
Oh, in the Ash vs. the Evil Dead, I don't know, because he's a bit older, isn't he? So I imagine...
But he's such a physical actor, and he does it so well. We thought, obviously, he's taken a step back from maybe the majority of it, but how much of these scenes is actually still here without a clever cutaway or something like that?
Yeah, doing like his Three Stooges stuff.
Yeah, he's amazing at it.
He is an amazing physical actor. You know that sequence in The Evil Dead 2 when the hand's possessed and it's smashing plates over him and whatnot? The raw footage of that is incredible because it's exactly the same as what's in the film, uncut. You know, that scene where it grabs him by the hair and flips him over.
Yeah,
Bruce Campbell just did that.
Yeah,
he just did it like in shot. It's like, wow. Yeah, he's a good physical actor, is Bruce. But then again, that's kind of like where he started, isn't it? Like, he always had to do that. And apparently Sam Raimi just loves torturing him.
Yeah,
so, you know.
Yeah, it shows.
Yeah, done it. Doesn't it,
It really does, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Jer. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this.
We will talk about Alien. Shall we do Alien next time?
Yes. Shall we
talk
start
about...
start with Alien and then work our way through to
Prometheus? Yeah. Do you want to do Covenant as well?
I think we should. Yeah, just to really air out the dirty laundry. Yeah, let's do that.
Why not? You know, I mean, I actually for the first time watched Covenant recently. Yeah.
It has its problems, but it is a step up from Prometheus. That's all I will say. But on the closing on that statement, fuck Ridley Scott as well. So.
Well, there's a closing statement for you guys. Thanks, Jer, and thanks you guys at home, and we'll see you all next time. Bye bye.
All the best. Bye bye.